Jenny is 43 years old. She is married to Leroy Kreutzer. She has two daughters, Kelsey and Carly. After graduating from Fort Hays State University, Jenny began her career in human resources, and that is what she continues to do. Jenny has served on various boards and volunteer roles, including Big Brothers Big Sisters, Girl Scouts of Kansas Heartland, Catholic Charities, and Wichita Adaptive Sports. Jenny has been involved in the Miss Wheelchair Kansas organization since 2011 and currently serves as the president of the Miss Wheelchair Kansas Board of Directors. In her free time, she enjoys traveling with her family, watching her kids play sports, crafting, and lounging around with her beloved dogs. So I'll just go ahead and get started and ask you what led to your disability.
Well, I broke my back when I was 16 years old. I was on a church group ski trip with my then boyfriend, now husband. We were skiing with a church group program, and we had been there this was my third year skiing. And I just had a freak accident, hit some ice, and slid down the mountain and hit my back on a tree and had an incomplete spinal cord injury at that point.
Okay, so I want to ask you what went through your mind when that happened? Did you immediately know that something was wrong, or is it something that you learned over time with the help of friends right after the accident? Um, what was that moment like?
So when I first hit the tree, I couldn't feel or move anything from my neck down. And Leroy rushed to my side, and my friends went down to get help. And I remember within a few seconds, I could feel and move my arms, and I could feel an unevenness in my back. And so he kept me still while we waited for the ski patrol to come. And I knew it was serious just by the way they were handling me, putting me on the boogie board, the stabilizing board. And then once I finally got down the mountain, and all of my friends and our chaperones were there by the ambulance waiting, I knew it was bad. And one of our chaperones is a nurse, and she always said her worst fear is for one of her kids to get hurt on one of the skiing trips. And I just remember seeing her and saying, "I'm so sorry, Betty." And then I was loaded into the ambulance, and I was taken on to a local hospital where they cut my clothes off. And I remember being very upset because I had worked very hard to pay for those new clothes, and they said, "Honey, this is serious." And so and at that point my family wasn't there yet, and so it was pretty overwhelming.
I can't even begin to imagine that, but I do appreciate you being so open and willing to share. So, um, what were some of the fears you faced after your injury, and how did you overcome them?
I think the biggest fear for me, and one of the first questions I asked the doctor, once I was stable and my family was there, and the doctor kind of came in and explained kind of what the long-term prognosis was. I said, "Can I still have kids?" And it was unusual for, somebody like 16-year-old girl to even be thinking about that. And I had not really thought much about having kids at that point. But once she said yes, then I thought, well, okay, then let's just make this life work. And so I knew what my goals were for, going to college, and what I wanted to do with my life. And those things really didn't change because of the accident.
That is good to know and encouraging. I know that I've heard from a lot of people that an accident like that can be very traumatic and derail them incredibly, not only just physically, but emotionally. And so It's so good to hear that you had just such a positive outlook, maybe not the entire time, but on things overall, and we're able to really decide. I won't say immediately, but decide, this is what my life is going to be like, and I'm going to be okay. And I'm sure that a lot of people will find that incredibly encouraging. So I want to move into now your work with Miss Wheelchair Kansas and the organization. So I want to ask you, how did you come to hear about Miss Wheelchair Kansas and become involved in the program?
Well, I think I first started learning about it probably in 2008 or 2009. And somehow or another, Carrie Greenwood, the state coordinator, had at the time, now the CEO and state coordinator of the Miss Wheelchair Kansas program. She had gotten my information and had messaged me. And at the time, I wasn't interested. I just had, 2 kids, and I was working, and I was actually dealing with a really negative part of my spinal cord injury, which is pressure wounds. And I had a pressure wound for a number of years. And I was in 2009, it had gotten pretty severe. And so I was dealing with a lot of that. And then in 2010, my really good friend Tiffany Nickel was the Miss Wheelchair Kansas 2010. And so I started following her reign, and I invited her to my Girl Scout meeting. I was a troop leader for one of my daughters. And the way that those Girl Scouts looked at Tiffany and responded to her and just enjoyed learning from her, because she had the crown and because she had the sash, even though I was their Girl Scout leader and I worked with them every other week, they got so much more from Tiffany because of her status as a crowned Miss Wheelchair Kansas. And so after that, then I just decided I was going to go for it. And so 2011 came, and that's when I decided to throw my hat in the ring. And I didn't know what I was in for, but it was and still is a great ride.
So, talk a little bit about that experience of going through the process of that weekend. You and I both know how it works because we've obviously been through it. But talk about what you felt, just what you learned, and then were you surprised that you won, and what went through your mind?
So I was very much a climbing the corporate ladder at that time. My job was all consuming. And when it wasn't, when I wasn't putting 110% into my job, I was trying to put that same amount of effort into my family. And we had a lot of activities we were doing, and I was working a lot. And so when I went to the event, I was thinking, I brought my laptop, I'm going to go to a session, and then in my breaks I'm going to work, and I'm going to work all, I felt like I was going to, still make time for my job and all that during the weekend. And I had not put myself first in a very, very long time. And so when I got there, and there was a goodie bag and it had my name on it, and it was so nice and welcoming, and there was people there and they were excited to see me, and I was like, wow, like this is going to be fun. And so the whole idea of getting my laptop out in breaks and stuff, I mean, that just went out the window, because I was having so much fun, and joy was coming into my heart at that time, because I hadn't focused on myself in so long.
So you have competed and you're enjoying the weekend, and it's the last day of the competition, and that moment comes and your name is announced as the winner in 2011. What goes through your mind?
Oh my gosh. I and it's all such a blur. I don't really even remember who my opponent was. It just kind of is all a blur. I remember my family was there, my mom and dad, my sister, all my nieces, and my kids, my husband, and I was just overwhelmed with emotion because this was me in the spotlight, which I don't really like, but I know that as a woman in a wheelchair that's successful, that it's important for me to share my story, to give hope for others, and also to be a good example for people in the community. And so it was just very emotional, and kind of one of the defining moments, I think, in my adult life.
That is incredible, and I can definitely understand and relate, and I'm sure many others will be able to as well. I wanted to ask, as Miss Wheelchair Kansas, you are required to come up with a platform and a speech that you will share during your reign. So, would you talk a little bit about that and why you chose it?
The platform part was very difficult for me because when I first had my disability, I didn't want to be different. And so I didn't use the handicap placard for parking. I didn't do anything differently than I thought I did before. I if there was something I wanted to do, I went and did it, even if it was going to be more challenging. And so when the time came to create a platform speech, I was like, well, I don't really have a passion for changing anything in particular, like changing a law or changing accessibility issues, dealing with those kinds of things. I just want to live my life, and I want to let others watch me so that they can learn how people can navigate normal, society, even though they happen to navigate it in a chair. And so my platform was Mom on a Mission, leading by example, and it talked about giving back to your community in ways like volunteering, being a part of organizations like Girl Scouts of America, and just all the different things that, and being active in our student school, our children's school, and just trying to be contributing to society in positive ways versus one of the examples I gave was when I was in college and I had an opportunity to continue working at McDonald's, and I enjoyed my job there. It was fun. I had friends there. I was making money. And the government came back and said, if you want to keep getting your disability check, then you're going to have to stop working at McDonald's. And I could have made a decision at that point. Okay, the government's going to pay me not to work. It's not very much, or I can just give it back. And so that's what I ended up doing. And so I worked full time, and I continued to do things to make myself and my life, more prosperous down the road. And so I don't know, that's kind of how I ended up with my platform. But as you can tell, I don't really have a good way of articulating it, which is what I struggled most with during my reign.
Well, I think you are very articulate, and I think that a lot of people have been and will be touched by everything that you share. I know for me, watching you, I've always had a fear that I wouldn't be able to be a mother. I wouldn't be able to have children and lead them and teach them and allow them to learn, because I struggle so much with all of the physical things that I have to do. So just your example and leadership has been amazing in my life alone. So I'm sure you have inspired a number of people.
Oh, well, thank you. I do have another thing that I just remembered. So, kind of going back to a little bit about what you were saying is, one of the things that I loved to do was take my kids to the park. And the community park that we had, there was sand. And so if ever the girls wanted to be pushed on the swing, if my husband wasn't there, I couldn't do it. And so, one time my daughter said, I wish I had a stand-up mommy. And of course, she was 3 or 4, I don't remember. And so, but when I heard that, I was like, oh, like gut wrenching, because yeah, I'm sure she does wish she had a stand up mommy that could come and push her in the swing. But as a result of that, I ended up being contacted by a Rotary Club that was putting together an accessible playground. And the focus had been on children with disabilities being able to use the playground. But my point of view was, what about the parents of children? The parents have the disability. And so I was able to help fundraise for that playground to not only help the kids, but also the parents. And so that was a really cool experience too.
That is amazing. So, my next question for you has to do with your role in the Miss Wheelchair organization currently. What do you do, and how did your decision to continue working with the organization come about?
So I left Kansas for about a year and a half in 2013 and 14. And so I got a little bit disconnected from the Miss Wheelchair Kansas program during that time. And when I came back to Kansas, Carrie was in the process of putting together a board of directors. And she had asked me if I would be interested, now that I was back in Kansas, if I would be interested in being the chairperson for the board of directors. And so I knew a little bit about that just from my experience with other organizations. And so I felt like it was a role that I could do. And I was excited about taking the Miss Wheelchair Kansas organization to the next level, to where it has a board of directors. And so I was happy to be a part of that foundation. And so my role as the chairperson is to facilitate the board meetings that we have a couple of times a year. And then I also serve on some committees, including like the event committee and the marketing committee. And of course, I help, as all the board members do, with any kind of fundraising or representing the organization in different events. So that's kind of my role as the chairperson.
Well, it sounds like you do a lot for this organization, and I'm sure it is greatly appreciated. Do you have a favorite role that you're like, ooh, I get to work on this some more and are excited about?
Well, so I really do enjoy the recruitment process. I think anybody that knows about this program has always got their radar open for women in wheelchairs or kids in wheelchairs. And, some of the other organizations that I volunteer with, sometimes I do come across good candidates for the programs. And so I coach wheelchair basketball, and one of my athletes that joined the program last year, right away I could see she's our next little Miss Wheelchair. And visiting with her mom, and just seeing how shy this little girl was, I thought, gosh, I'm not sure, but it has been amazing for her. And that's Miss Leslie Lane, and she's our little miss this year. And her family have just embraced all of the activities, and you can really see how much she's grown just in the short period of time. And so I think the recruiting is the piece that I enjoy the most.
That is amazing, and I'm sure there have been over the years many more wonderful moments where you're like, I'm so glad I'm a part of this. My last, well, I don't know if it's my last question, but my next question for you is, obviously every year we hold an annual event. What is your favorite part of that, and how do you typically participate?
Well, my favorite part is getting to interact with the former title holders. And I last year we did an alumni luncheon, and I do think that that was enjoyable. I was also in the middle of a couple other things that weekend, and so it probably could be a little bit more robust in the future. I would like to see us continue to expand our alumni network, because these women that go finish, their title holder year, they don't just stop because they're not Miss Wheelchair Kansas anymore. These women are going out in the world and doing amazing things. And so I think it's really neat to be able to catch up with them and to understand what all they are accomplishing and what mountains they're moving. And so to me, that is very fulfilling, because we're welcoming another sister into the sisterhood, but we have to embrace the ones that have been in there, before. And so I think that would be the most, the thing that I enjoy the most. And of course, my kids enjoy the silent auction, because we always end up with a lot of different things from the silent auction. So and that's another piece that we enjoy.
That is amazing. And it's so great that you get to share this experience with your children. It wasn't a question I had, but talk a little bit about that. You obviously had children after your injury, so they've only known your life in a chair, but talk about your decision to have them involved in watching this organization grow and what it stands for.
So my kids are very good advocates, not only for me, but for themselves. And so I think because they've grown up knowing, that things are more challenging for some people. And I remember, being at a big event center one time, and it was cold and rainy, and it wasn't accessible. And my young daughter and I finally made it to a door, but the attendant at the door would not open the door because it was not the right entrance to go in. And I was crying, and my daughter was crying, and this lady was refusing to let me in. And I was going to have to go back down a big hill and through a bunch of rocks. And my daughter, started advocating for me. And so there's that. And we got in through that door. And we did it in a way that's, was respectful, but it's just an example of where my kids learn that, things aren't always going to work perfectly. And so number one, you got to adapt whenever something doesn't go right. And then number two, if it's something that's going to keep reoccurring, how do we change it so that, things are easier for us in the future? So my kids have always been involved. In fact, they're going to be helping me this weekend at a wheelchair basketball tournament. And that's kind of the thing that we like to do as a family. We like to participate with people that are our friends, and the people at Miss Wheelchair Kansas, they're my friends, and so they're my family's friends. And so, same with the athletics that we do. We're all a team. We're the Kreutzer team, and we take care of each other and we help each other.
If there is a piece of advice or a misconception you want to break about people with disabilities, or information you want to give to the rest of the world, what would that be?
Well, people with disabilities can lead very fulfilling lives. And being a part of the community of people with disabilities, it has really given me a different perspective than other people might have. But everybody has a story. And everyone has challenges in their lives, whether it's some kind of a physical disability or some other kind of an issue that they deal with. I've grown to learn a little bit more about mental illness and, substance abuse disorder based on some other organizations that I participate in, and, what leads people down their path in life. It's all different. And so I think that we as a society, we just need to continue to lift people up and to support our communities in the best ways that we're physically able to. And, sometimes that's spreading piece of encouraging words, or maybe it's giving a smile to somebody in the grocery store when looks like they're pretty angry, just trying to be a bright light in somebody's day. And you can do that, and it doesn't cost anything to be kind to each other. And so I think that's the biggest thing that I want to teach my kids, and that's the way that I want to lead my life.
Great. That is amazing. And you are setting such a powerful example. And I just want to thank you again for sitting down with me and sharing your story and allowing people to see what you've experienced and how you've grown as a result of that. So thank you. I appreciate it.
No problem.